would back me up?
Yeah.
And why? He likes fights?
I like fights.
Jim Pace is my mother's boyfriend. They've been going out for about 15 years. I would say that Jim Pace started going out with my mother around 2003. And Robin Pace was introduced as Jim Pace's daughter. I think that Robin Pace is also known as Leah Rafalco. And Leah Rafalco is Josh Medina's girlfriend. I first met Josh Medina and Leah Rafalco in Sandy Hook, Newtown. Ivan Becker had an apartment, a two-family house. He rented one side of the house, the upstairs in Sandy Hook, Newtown. And Ivan Becker lived there with a girl named Khalees. And they had 2 bedrooms. And for a little while, Josh Medina lived there with his girlfriend named Leah Rafalco. this was around 1997 or 1998. So that was the first time I met Josh. So Josh was he said he was Puerto Rican, but I believe that he is Middle Eastern as well. And he talks with something like a California accent. And he was into skateboarding. And he was a real upbeat and friendly kid. He was good at making conversation. He also sold weed, shrooms, and ecstasy. So Leah Rafalco was a little younger than Josh. Let's say it was around 1998. I was around 22 or 23. Josh was around 20 or 21, he said. And I think Leah Rafalco was around 17 or 18 years old. That was what she said. So Leah Rafalco, I think, was from Bethel, Connecticut. And she was raised by her grandmother. I can't remember if her mom got locked up or if she died because she was a drug addict. But Leah lived with her grandmother. And I think that she said that her father died by committing suicide. So I hate to be callous, but after everything that I know about these people involved in MK Ultra and secret societies in the military, most of what they say is a front. Most of what they say is made up. I would not be surprised if Leah's grandmother was someone that Leah was assigned to at an early age. It was something like her handler, a lesbian handler, whose job it was to control Leah and whatever other kids they had in that house. I think Leah had a younger sister that was 5 or 10 years younger than she was. And they're being brought up by this grandmother, this older lady, who I think is a lesbian military agent. So a little while later, Ivan Becker and Kyle Reardon rented an apartment in Danbury. I think it was called Shepherd's Hill Condo Complex. And it was a 2-bedroom apartment, but the rooms were pretty big. So Josh Medina ended up moving into that apartment with Kyle Reardon and Ivan Becker. And he slept on the sofa. Then around the late 90s, I would say around 1999, Ivan Becker and Kyle Reardon move out. And Josh Medina stays in that apartment and Leah moves back in. I don't know if Leah would stay there from time to time, but it was like it was not a permanent relationship between Josh and Leah. I wouldn't see her for a long time, and then I would go to his house and she would be there, sitting on the sofa, watching TV. Both Josh Medina and Leah Rafalco both had a drug problem. They were addicted to Oxycontin. They would buy 80 milligram pills of Oxycontin, and that was what they were on. At the time, Josh sold ecstasy. So the funny thing is that Jim Pace's brother, named Richie Pace, is also on Oxycontins, and he sells Oxycontins. He gets prescribed Oxycontins and he sells them. And Jim Pace told my mother that he went to the mall with Richie, his brother, to sell somebody some Oxycontins. And Jim Pace said that he didn't expect to be going on a drug run. He didn't expect to be selling drugs at the mall. But he was kind of led into that by his brother, who didn't tell him all the details. His brother said, just give me a ride to the mall. And once they got there, they walked in together. And Rich did a drug deal. He sold Oxycontins to somebody at the mall. And Jim Pace was a little upset that his brother involved him in that activity without Jim really knowing what he was getting into. That was the story that Jim Pace told my mother. So I find it very interesting that Richie Pace, who is Jim Pace's brother, is involved in selling and using Oxycontins, which is the same drug that Leah Rafalco, also known as Robin Pace, is addicted to. So around 1999, Leah got pregnant And the truth is, I never really saw their kid. I wouldn't go over to their apartment too often, maybe once or twice a month. And sometimes Leah would be there, and sometimes she wouldn't. And at one point, they had a bunch of kid toys in the dining room. I'm going to guess around 1999 or 2000. They had a bunch of kids' toys in the dining room. The dining room had been changed into a playroom. And I think at one point, I went to Josh's house and I started joking around and laughing. And both Josh and Leah said, shh, the baby's sleeping. You're being too loud. So their baby, their daughter, was in one of the back rooms sleeping. But I do not remember ever seeing their daughter. But I'm going to guess that their daughter was born around 1999. So I guess Leah and Josh would get into arguments a lot. And Leah would end up moving back to her grandmother's house. Oftentimes, Josh would say that his daughter is at Leah's grandmother's house. I might ask him about how his daughter's doing, and he would say, oh, she's with her grandmother now. So it was like Leah would move back and forth between living with Josh and living with her grandmother, who I believe is just a military handler for Leah, also known as Robin. It was the summer of 2002. Leah Rafalco broke up with Josh, or she moved out, and Josh is making a big deal about it. And Leah has not returned to the house for a good amount of time. And Josh is convinced that they have broken up for good, and he's very upset about it. And around this time, he has also used so much of the Oxycontins that he has spent all his money, so he cannot buy more ecstasy to sell. He had been selling ecstasy for a living to support himself, to pay the rent, and to support his Oxycontin habit. But he had spent all the money, and he had no money to buy more ecstasy. And around that time, Leah broke up with him, and he was refusing to care for his cat and his fish. He had a fish tank, and he was really pissed off, and he was really acting emotional, kind of childlike. And he wanted to know if he could move into my condominium with me, because he was about to lose everything, and Leah was not coming back. And I told him no. My mother had already made plans to move into the condo I was staying at. She was going to take it over, and I was going to move out. So I told Josh that my mother's going to move in here and take it over. So I don't want a bunch of kids moving in here. But the funny thing is that I don't really think that Leah Rafalco and Josh Medina had a regular relationship. It was another front, because like I said, I would go there for a couple times a month, and a few months would go by, and I would never see Leah. And if I would ask him where Leah is or where his kid is, he would always say at Leah's grandmother's house. And then one day, Leah would be there on the couch, watching TV as if nothing had changed and she had never moved out, or as if she was always there, which she was not. And I do not remember seeing their kid there too often. So it was always off and on, with Leah staying there at the Shepherd's Hill condo with Josh. So I did not see Josh for a few months. And then in the summer of 2002, I run into Josh, or he calls me up, and he says he's staying back at his mom's house. So I go over there to visit him, and it's around the summer of 2002. And I tell him that I'm planning on moving up to New Hampshire to move into an apartment with Rachel. And currently I was working 2 jobs. I was working at Belimo Air Controls, and I was also working at Trader Joe's, and I was trying to save up money. So I was driving up to see Rachel on the weekends, and she had gotten an apartment in Dover, New Hampshire. So I was trying to get up there and stay with her full time. So Josh kind of told me a sad story about Leah, he said that Leah, also believed to be Robin Pace, was working as a stripper and she was making a lot of money at a strip club. And that was good because Leah had an expensive heroin addiction at that time. So Leah had graduated from Oxycontin to just buying bags of street dope, of heroin, because that was cheaper than buying the Oxycontin. I think they were saying that they would spend up to $80 a pill for an Oxycontin, 80 milligram. I think they said $1 a milligram. So in the summer of 2002, Leah was working at a strip club and she also was addicted to heroin. And Josh said that she was staying back at her grandmother's house, but he suspected she had moved out to her own apartment or in with somebody else. And he said that Leah was quite possibly a prostitute as well. And I don't know how to say it in a respectful manner, but Josh said as a going away present, as a going away thing, Leah performed a sexual act on Josh. And it was the first time Leah did something like that in that same manner. And it was much different than how she had done that before. So it was kind of done in a professional manner, almost as if her abilities had been practiced and she had gotten better at a certain sort of thing involving sex. And due to this, Josh thought that she was also prostituting herself through the strip club. And that was a way she would make a lot more money than just taking her clothes off on stage and getting tips. She was also prostituting herself. So a couple of years go by, and around 2004, I'm staying at my mother's house in Middlebury. Around 2003 or 2004, she moved out of the condo that she took over from me in Brookfield. She sold that, took the money, and bought a house in Middlebury. So this was around 2003, 2004. And at that time, she started dating Jim Pace. And Jim Pace was a teacher at Danbury High School. My mother taught English at Danbury High School. And Jim Pace was something like a detention room monitor. He taught detention or in-school suspension at Danbury High School. He was the suspension teacher. So she met him and she started dating Jim Pace. They would go out to eat, after work. And a couple of times he stopped by my mother's house to meet me and my brother. And my first impression was kind of bad. A movie by Michael Moore was on. I think it was Bowling for Columbine. And that is a big liberal documentary. Michael Moore is a Democrat. He's a big liberal. And I think I said something along the lines of what they should do is the government should give people more small loans so that they could start independent businesses or go to school. Instead of just handing them a small welfare check, they should have programs that give them loans if they come up with a business plan or an education plan. And for some reason that really pissed him off, and he started yelling, "That will never work. We already give welfare recipients too much money on welfare. Now you want the government to hand out even more money? You're full of it, and your idea sucks, and you're a dumb young kid." So that's not the best attitude to have towards some young kid you're just meeting. I was around 26 years old at the time, and Jim Pace was 50 or 60. So if you have a younger guy trying to talk to you about politics and some of their viewpoint is a little off, what you probably want to do is listen to them and then tell them your viewpoint in kind of a calm manner. But he just couldn't control his hatred and just kind of regarded me as a liberal or a Democrat, which I wasn't. I really had no idea about politics at all. I just was watching the Michael Moore documentary. So that was my first meeting with Jim Pace. And he kind of yelled at me and he stormed out. And my mother said, "Way to go, John. You chased away Jim." And I was like, "I don't know why he acted that way. I just was telling him my idea." So at some point, Jim introduces his quote-unquote daughter, whose name is Robin. She went by Robin. So I'm looking at photographs, and Robin is actually Leah Rafalco. It's Leah Rafalco. So I think in the summer of 2001, when Josh was crying about how he wanted to move into my house because he was about ready to lose his condo, around that time he had a shoebox filled with old photographs. And he says, we're kind of going through the box of photographs. And he's like, "You could take some of these if you want, because I'm just going to go throw them in the dumpster." You know, he was just depressed and kind of had this weird attitude. So I ended up getting like 10 or 20 photographs off of Josh Medina. And a few included photographs of Leah Rafalco. And when I went back and looked at these photographs, Leah Rafalco is Robin. It's the same woman. He also gave me photographs of his daughter. I have 2 or 3 photographs of Josh Medina's daughter that he had with Leah Rafalco, also known as Robin Pace. So here are the photographs that Josh Medina gave me around the summer of 2001. So I was lucky to get these photographs so I could figure out a lot of this. So I was lucky to get these photographs so I could figure out a lot of this. So Jim Pace is not a real individual. So it's kind of sad when you hear my mother talk and she has nothing but cool things to say about Robin Pace. How she went to school and got her master's degree, and how she teaches, I think, mentally disabled kids. Anyway, she teaches kids. So my mother could relate to that. So Robin Pace's husband is named, I forget his name, but he is also a teacher. So they just have all their shit together. Their combined salary is close to 200 grand a year. They both are highly educated with their master's degrees. And they had an excellent father being Jim Pace, who raised them up right and told them, go become a teacher. That's the way that you could get a good salary and support yourself. So my mother believes all of this, when in fact, Robin Pace is a heroin prostitute. She's a dopehead prostitute that used to date Josh Medina. So the sad thing is, when I look at their photographs of their daughter, they have this cute daughter together. I forget what the girl's name was or is, but I think she was born around 1999. I'm going to guess. But there's this other person that went to Brookfield High School named Michael Hudak, and he kind of had this weird attitude where he would kind of glare at you if you walked past him in the hall. And he had this look. So I took this photograph off of his Facebook page. And this is the exact look that he would give you as he walked past you in the hallway. So I really did not like Michael Hudak at all. So I cannot remember if Michael Hudak sent me a friend request or if I saw him as somebody else's friend. But I took a look at his page and I didn't really like what I saw. And Michael Hudak, in my opinion, has a very evil look in his eyes. In a lot of these photographs, he kind of looks crazy. His eyes are kind of pitch black, and he kind of looks like a nut. He looks kind of sadistic. And there is this young lady that is pictured with him. I guess supposedly this is his daughter. But what caught my attention is that whenever he takes pictures with this young lady, who is supposedly his daughter, they're always hugging each other. In a couple of the photographs, they have hearts kind of going around them. In one of their photographs, they are lying in a hammock together, kind of holding the camera above them and then taking a selfie. So I have a daughter, and I know what's normal and what's not normal. So Michael Hudak and his daughter, her name is Abby, I guess, are taking photographs that look like they're almost dating. I can't tell if that was his girlfriend or what she is. I can see if you take a photograph with your daughter to put your arm around her, but most of the photographs that I take with my family, we kind of stand next to each other and just take a family photograph. It's kind of immature and weird to have your daughter, who's becoming a young lady, kind of jump up and wrap her legs around you and then put little hearts around the photograph. Or take all these photographs where you're lying down together. It looks a little odd, especially with this weird look on Michael Hudak's face. He has this beady look to his completely black eyes. And he has this weird smile, this weird sadistic or mischievous smile. He does not look like a normal guy. These do not look like wholesome family photographs. So as I was looking at the photographs of this girl, she looked familiar. And I took out all the photographs of Josh Medina and Leah, which included a few photographs of their daughter. And I think that this young woman photographed with Michael Hudak is Josh Medina and Leah Rafalco's daughter. For some reason, she is now with Michael Hudak, and Michael Hudak is saying that this is his daughter. If you compare this photograph of Leah Rafalco and Josh Medina's daughter to this photograph of Michael Hudak's daughter, you can easily see that this is the same kid. This is the same girl. So Leah Falco is Robin Pace. So for some reason, Robin Pace, also known as Leah Falco, is having children with Josh Medina in 1999 when they're both addicted to Oxycontin. And Leah's working as a prostitute and a stripper. They have a daughter together, and then a young woman that looks exactly like their daughter is now on Michael Hudak's Facebook page. So this is their military cult. This is their top tier of their secret society. This is probably what Leah Falco was raised as when she was a young kid. She wasn't raised by her parents. She was raised by some random guy who would raise her up, who looked something like this. And then she would wind up with an old woman that she calls her grandmother, and is probably just something like a military handler who was most likely a lesbian. I think what they do is that these kids get abused growing up, and then they get conditioned to be homosexual. And I think that all the abuse, the sexual abuse that they tolerate when they're young, conditions them not to like relationships. They have no respect for husbands and wives or admiration for regular American families. So they have no problem attacking any type of American family because they have no respect for that. That is why these military secret societies involved in MK Ultra mind control and the occult do this. And that's to condition the kid to give up on love and to only practice hate and to not take anything serious. If Leah were to meet a nice boy that wanted to treat her like a regular girl and date her, Leah Falco would be conditioned not to respect him, to consider him stupid, and she will be rewarded by the secret society, by the military, if she would set up her little boyfriend to get into trouble or to die. And they all think it's real funny. They all have this very sadistic outlook on regular people. Normal people want to meet friends. They want to meet a girlfriend. They want to get married. They want to have kids. They want to raise their families upright. But these kids that get molested from a young age want to sabotage all of that. They want to teach them a lesson. This is what you'll get for believing in love. This is what you'll get for being a sucker. Nobody is as strong as our little MK Ultra gang over here. All the lesbians kick it with the lesbians. All the homosexual men kick it with the homosexual men. But they work together to create these facades. They work together to create these fake families that go on to run operations on the American public. They pretend they're a real family. Who knows where Jim Pace is from? He says he's from Queens, New York. But Robin Pace is not some college-educated teacher. She's a heroin addict, a stripper and a prostitute, raised up by a lesbian handler in a military secret society since she was a little kid. And guess where their kids go? Guess where their kids wind up? Over here with men like this. And they don't care. Robin Pace, also known as Leah Falco, and Josh Medina, I don't think they really care what happened to their daughter. That's why they're chosen for this type of work. It happened to them when growing up, and hey, they're tough now. And they know how the world works. And they know the benefits from this little organized crime ring. This military organized crime ring. They all reap the benefits of setting up another American family to get attacked and stolen from. That's what the military is. It's organized crime. That's what they're doing to the American public that they're sworn to protect and serve. They're attacking everybody in organized crime rings. I guess in the older days, when you would get one of these military secret societies after you, like the Knights of Malta or the Knights of Columbus, they would say the mafia is out to get me. I'm being stalked by a bunch of these strangers. They must be the mafia who are stalking me and trying to intimidate me and trying to ruin my life. So the mafia, organized crime, are just secret societies, are just military-run secret societies. And this is what they're all a part of. So now Robin Pace, also known as Leah Rafalco, spends her days with her father Jim Pace and her uncle Richie Pace, thinking of ways on how to sabotage my life, how to sabotage my mother's life, and how to create conflict in our life. In the Jim Pace report, it's on the Flower of Life series, you could hear about how Jim Pace stayed over my house in New Hampshire. And every time he came here, he tried to sabotage my life. And the last time he was here, he was pouring black mold junk all over my house. He had some sort of grease, some sort of liquid that black mold would come out of, and he's pouring it all over my house to try to get my house infested with black mold. So that would be a sure way that this organized crime ring could slowly destroy my life, take me from being a pretty strong, intelligent guy to being a pretty weak and crazy guy who would slowly lose everything to this crime ring and then eventually probably become homeless, where these military secret societies could easily abduct me and I could disappear. What happened to John? I don't know. He started getting crazy. There was black junk growing all over his house. He couldn't work anymore. He couldn't take care of his house anymore. He eventually had to foreclose on the house. And the last I heard, he was staying at the shelter. Well, I'll tell you where these people wind up. They wind up killed by these demented lunatics that I am exposing. So this is the type of person that does well in the CIA. This is your top tier of CIA people. Drug-addled ex-prostitutes like Robin Pace, also known as Leah Rafalco. Knights of Columbus, Knights of Malta, Jim Paces, and heroin or Oxycontin dealing people like Richie Pace. And ecstasy dealing people like Josh Medina. And when Josh Medina and Leah Rafalco have a little daughter, they might be able to keep her for a year or two before she winds up property of the U.S. military, property of the Knights Templar, property of the Freemasons, property of the CIA. And she's installed in some dude's house named Michael Hudak, who looks like this. So that is your U.S. military. That is your CIA. That is your Illuminati. So what is also funny is that when I started thinking about Robin Pace, she also had another identity. She also worked at Danbury Ambulance for about a half a year. I would say around 1998 or early 1999. So do you know how I said that she would only hang out with Josh ever so often, and she would act like she was living there, and then you wouldn't see her for a while? And if you asked him, oh, she's at her grandmother's house. No, she was running other operations, and she was pretending to be other people. So Robin Pace, also known as Leah Rafalco, also worked at Danbury Ambulance around 1998. I think she was in the dispatch office. She helped run the dispatch center, and she called herself Natalie, and she supposedly dated a guy named Chris Williams. So Chris Williams is the Boy Scout. He's the guy that acts like the Boy Scout of this organization that I'm describing. But I wouldn't be surprised if Chris Williams used to live in Scarsdale, New York, went to Hitchcock Presbyterian Church in the mid-'80s. I think he acted as an aide in a Sunday school class that I was in when I was a little kid. When I was 8 or 9, Chris Williams was an aide in my Sunday school class. He was a teacher's aide. And then 10 or 15 years later, he has made his way up to not only Danbury, Connecticut, but working at the same exact company that I work for. So some of you may want to start analyzing all of these people that you met as acquaintances and friends throughout your life, because these MK Ultra military operatives come up again and again and again throughout your life, often acting as many different individuals. They have many different identities, and they do this because they are the ones who know you best. They are the ones that know how to control you the best. They are the ones to know how to set you up the best. So it gets kind of creepy when I think about my mom sitting down with the Paces and thinking that they are some nice, prestigious family that are all teachers. They are all educated people with master's degrees that make their living as teachers, when in fact they're nothing but a bunch of organized crime members. They're nothing but a bunch of lowlifes, like drug dealers and prostitutes and drug addicts. And these are the people that fool nice people like my mother. So this is your Robin Pace, also known as Leah Rafalco, also known as Natalie, and whatever other identities they want to dream up for her. Okay, so I forgot to include this with the first recording. So I just want to do this before I forget to include this very important part. I just don't have all the dates, but it was the winter of 2017. And I had Rudy Siegel installing a window and a short staircase at my house in New Hampshire. So I spoke about Rudy Siegel in the Flower of Life documentary series, and Rudy is an agent of the U.S. military who I had befriended and then went on to rent a room from Rudy, so I trusted him. So around February or March of 2017, Rudy was doing that work at the house, so I had to pick him up in Connecticut and drive him to New Hampshire and then drive him back. So I do not remember if it was a weekday or not. I would not be surprised if it was during the week when I dropped him off. He had stayed at the house 2 nights and 3 days to get that work done. And then I transported him back to Connecticut. He was living in Watertown, Connecticut at that time. But during his stay, he put poison into most likely the coffee or the sugar, because that is something that I would use every day. And what they do is they put this drug into your coffee, and you use the drug every day, and it ends up building up in your system and getting worse and worse. And at the same time, they use these radio frequency energy weapons on you as well. So I had been drugged by Rudy Siegel, and as the weekend went on, the pain got worse and worse. And what it feels like is that something is pressing on your chest. And ever so often it feels like your pulse rate spikes up. It goes from 60 to 80 to an elevated pulse rate from one moment to the next. And you are filled with panic and pain and difficulty breathing. So I was having a tough time when Rudy was over doing that work. So as I was driving Rudy back to his house in Connecticut, I was really feeling all of these changes and all of the pressure as induced by their radio frequency weapons. I think part of what the drugs do is give you something like a mild LSD that puts you in a bad trip. So you're hyper aware of everything that they're doing. And this could panic you if your hands begin to get numb while you're driving, and you could feel your heart rate go up, and you start to get a pain in your chest. To anybody in the world, you are about to suffer a heart attack. You are having a medical emergency. But the funny thing is, all of this could be induced through the radio frequency energy system. They could connect somebody to you who was basically banging their elbows on a table, and you will feel your hands get kind of numb. Your heart rate will spike a little bit. It will elevate, but it's not something that will kill you. And the pressure on your chest may hurt a lot, but it's not something that will kill you. What tends to get people is when they lose their minds, and they lose their nerve, and they lose control, and then they could be controlled by the military. So if you are given this drug by the military, everything that they're doing is amplified. So it is scary, to say the least, at times. So I don't want to go into too much more than that. The important thing to tell you is I drove Rudy Siegel back to Watertown, Connecticut, and then I dropped him off. And I was thinking, that was a rough drive. It's like a 3-hour drive. If only I could go somewhere and meditate and relax before I drive back to New Hampshire. So I called up Jim Pace, who was my mother's boyfriend, and he lived in Danbury, Connecticut in a condo. And at that time, he was at my mother's house in California. He was staying at my mother's house, and his condo was supposedly empty. And I had a spare key that he had given me to his condo. So I called up Jim, and I said to Jim, hey, is there any way I could stop by your house? I just dropped Rudy off, and I'm really tired. I feel like sitting down for a little bit before I drive back to New Hampshire. Could I go crash at your house and take a short nap at your house for an hour or two before heading back to New Hampshire? And Jim said, sure, no problem at all. Whenever you want to go to my condo, whenever you want to go over is fine with me. You got a key? And I said, yes. He goes, go right over. Don't worry about a thing. And he seemed real enthusiastic and happy to tell me that. So I was still about 45 minutes away from Danbury. I was still in Watertown, Connecticut. So I started to drive toward Danbury. And once again, they began to hit me with the radio frequency weapons. And I felt a heaviness in my chest, and my pulse was beating fast. And they were inducing me with a lot of anger. They would have drivers cut me off. They would have people doing things on the road to aggravate me. And then they would be attaching someone to me with a severe anger problem, trying to induce this rage in me. So it was a lot of pressure and stress driving into Connecticut. So when I get to Jim Pace's condo, parked out front is Robin Pace, also known as Leah Rafalco, and her husband named Matt. I cannot remember his last name. I will try to get that. So for some reason, Robin Pace and her husband Matt decided to go to Jim Pace's condo the same exact time that I asked Jim if I could go over there for an hour or two. So that was quite a coincidence. So they had an SUV, and the back of the SUV was open, and they had a bunch of random belongings that they were walking into Jim's house. It was the most stupid collection of random things I had ever seen. It looked like they had just rounded up some various things at their house that they were bringing into Jim Pace's house. So when I walked up, they said, oh, we just had to bring a few things over. We did not have room for this at our house. So Jim said to bring it on over. So first, I don't know for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was a Monday or a Tuesday. I thought it was a weekday that I drove Rudy back. I think I picked him up on a Saturday, and he stayed Saturday and Sunday night. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was a Monday. And I got him back to Watertown, I think it was around 1 o'clock. So Robin Pace, along with her husband Matt, are both teachers. They teach school. So why are they dropping a bunch of random things off at Jim's house at 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a school day? Why are they not at work? And I also noticed that they did not have their son with them. They supposedly had a 4 or 5-year-old son at that time, and they did not have their son with them. So it is extremely odd that it would work out that way, out of the blue. And I've never done this before. I called Jim in California at my mom's house, and I say, can I stop by your condo? Because I'm dropping off a friend in Connecticut. I just want to hang out for an hour or two before I drive back. And he says, sure. And when I get there, Robin Pace and her husband are there running things in and out of the house. And so I walked over to her and I tried to give her a little hug. And she gave me a hug. But the strangest thing was how Robin Pace acted. When she saw that I was a little nervous, I was a little rattled due to what the military was doing to me. She looked almost insanely happy. Her eyes became very cruel. It was a look of happiness mixed with sadism. It was the creepiest look I had ever seen. And for the most part, I haven't really hung out much with Leah Rafalco as Robin Pace. A couple of times there was a family function where she was there, and I made small talk with her. And once she was staying at my mom's place when I was also there. She stayed there for 2 or 3 nights, and we would have dinner with the whole family, quote unquote family there. And I would talk to her a little bit. So I went to give her a little hug, and then I was looking at her, and she just looked sadistically happy when she saw that I appeared a little nervous. She looked like she was a vampire, ready to strike. She sensed that I was a little weak, and it brought out this, her inner self. It brought out her true personality, which is this very sadistic, kind of sick woman. And then Matt walked in and said, yeah, we had to drop off a few things because we didn't have room for it at our house. And it was something like a rolled up poster board, a globe, you know, a half empty cardboard box, you know, a child's easel, like a child's chalkboard. So it was kind of obvious that they had come up with this stuff as an excuse to get over there. And the look on her face, it just suggested somebody who was up to no good. She could not hide the fact that she was involved in something. It was like the vampires sensed my weakness. The vampires smelled blood, and they began to close in. And I had never seen her look more happy in my life. She looked like a drug addict that was ready to get drugs. I've never seen someone look that sadistically happy before. So this is Leah Rafalco, also known as Robin Pace, around March of 2017. So I walked upstairs. I said, I don't want to be in your way. I'm just going to go lie down for a minute because it's been a long trip and I got a very bad headache. And they said, do you want us to turn on the heat? And I said, no, that's not necessary. I'm used to New Hampshire being cold anyway. It's kind of warm down here in Connecticut. Don't worry about turning on the heat for me. I'll only be here for a half hour or so. So they said, fine, and I walked upstairs. And I could hear them walking up and down the stairs. And then the central air unit turned on anyway. They turned it on anyway. And they quickly left the house. So as soon as it kicked on, I had to leave that house. So what they will do is put something into the central air unit. They'll put something into the vents that will circulate throughout the house and also attack your nervous system. So I do not know exactly what it is, but I would not be surprised if it's something that produces a vapor. I really do not know if it is a powder or if it is a gas or if it's something like a piece of wax or soap. I really do not know what it is, but it will affect your nervous system and your respiratory system. So it's real easy for the military to give these people anything to bring into that house. It could be something that they'll put into the heating or ventilation system. It could be something that releases a vapor. So this happened once at my father's house. Unexpectedly, he left for California. He wouldn't tell me until the night before that he was taking a trip to California. So he kind of sprung that on me. So that morning, I drove him to a hotel that had a shuttle service to JFK Airport. And when I got back to the house, I walked inside and I felt relatively okay until the central air unit kicked on. So as soon as it kicked on, I began to have difficulty breathing. And it was extremely bad, as in my diaphragm wasn't working so well. It was hard to breathe or get any air at all. It was like my body was not processing the oxygen. And I tried to tolerate it for about 5 or 10 minutes. And I had to leave that house. And that took place at my dad's house in Shelton at the end of 2013. So I think that they were trying to kill me at that time. It was right after Christmas of 2013. So I think they're going to do the same thing to me now at Jim Pace's house. And Matt and Robin Pace were there to drop off whatever the military wanted to drop off to do that. So it's real easy for the military to give these people anything to bring into that house. And it could have something like a vapor weapon. It could be something that releases a vapor. It could be something that they'll put into the heating or ventilation system. So it gets very bad if you're able to resist the radio frequency attacks and the radio frequency programming. The military likes to use black mold, chemicals, and drugs on their targets to make sure that the people will eventually break down. So that was what they were doing to me. And hopefully these reports will educate you on how to best protect yourself, your family, and other people.
So describe your childhood to me.
Sexual, sensual, and sexual.
With who?
With everybody, ambiance.
Who are you having sex with?
The dollars I get dropped into my lap. Hello.
No, when you were a kid.
When I was a kid, I would get tips being a stripper.
When you were a kid. How old were you when you started stripping?
4 years old.
4.
Yeah, the feds came and picked me up, and they were like, "You way too fine." I have permission. They told me I wanted to.
Yeah. No, but I'm talking about your sexual enjoyment.
Yes, it took away all the sloppy second cum that was ugly out of my lungs. Because my daughters, they're like,
No, I'm talking about the PCP or the crystal meth or the rat poison.
Right. And then my dad had me cloned to bring them back to life. And then I found out later that it was all a hoax to get me to birth his babies. And then she got scared and cut my friend's dick off and glued it to her. Tried to make me suck it, and they were going to razor it off in my throat. She looks a big girl, but I see my mother, and she's like a midget. She gave birth to me through my father, and he's a milking kitty, and he raised me on dick cum instead of breast milk.
Also, keep in mind that just because you say something's fair use, give credit to the copyright owner, or add a disclaimer like no infringement intended, it does not mean that you're protected. Fair use is never a cut and dry process. In the US, fair use can only be determined in court by a judge. The judge will look at your case overall based on a few different factors.